In 3, 2. Thanks for tuning in to Theology Thursday. We are back, another episode, having a real conversation about life and Jesus. And we've got the usual crew today.
The usual crew?
Well, this is the original crew.
Oh, the OG.
Yeah, we've mixed it up. Donnie was on last week, which was
the
awesome.
OG.
And we'll have more special guests, people jumping in. But who are you?
My name's Kyle.
Kyle James.
Ben, Ryan.
And Craig Alden.
And I'm Scott Allen. So there we go. We got it. And this
You
is
didn't
just
know our middle names?
conversation about life and Jesus. And we are just reading through John, one of Jesus' earliest followers, his eyewitness account of just everyday life, getting to know who Jesus is and what he can do in our lives.
Speaking of middle names, is
Yeah.
Jesus' middle name Christ, or is his last name Christ?
Neither.
Middle name is the.
Okay.
Jesus the Christ.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay. We're so glad you tuned in.
Yes.
But you didn't tune in for that.
Oh, yeah, you did.
That's a question. I wanted a real answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a frog, a toad, in our yard the other day.
Ah,
Is it a toad or is it a frog?
It was a toad.
What's the
was
difference?
Size, I think.
That's
I just
the-
always go frogs are like little guys. Toad, he was the size of like your head. I mean, he was huge. And I look out the window and it had been raining. He's like, "Bloop." Like so big. I go, Amy, is his leg broken? And she's like, nah, I think he's just really fat. Like he was just limping along. Anyways, boys came out, everybody saw him, whatever. So I get home, they had named him.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
He was still there like all day just
Charlie.
chilling.
Toad the Frog.
Toad the Frog.
So- and-
Toad the frog?
I think so. I probably just messed that up. But they were like, his middle name is Duh.
Duh.
Yeah, that's how I got off on that. With Toad the
Man,
Frog.
we're
Toad
going
the
with
Frog.
the frog.
I think
Did you
think
keep
Or
it?
frog to toad.
man, I screwed that up.
Did
I'm
you
sure.
keep it?
No, our neighbors have a pond, like a watering thing, and so it snuck out from under the fence. Keep it, dude. Literally it's huge.
I saw a picture of it.
Yeah.
It's big.
We had
Yeah.
little frogs. My brother and I had lots of pets growing up, like reptiles and hamsters and gerbils and anything like random. I don't know why. But we had little frogs that we kept in a cage, and they got out quite frequently. And like I remember one morning taking a shower, and there's the pet frog. Like, oh, it got out. Put it back in the cage. And then one got out, and we didn't know. And we found it like many years later in the basement, not alive.
Where was
like
it?
a carcass in the corner. Like,
Oh
oh,
my God.
hey, there's our pet frog.
How
Oh,
did
it
that
just
not-
lived in the basement till it died?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
How did that not stink?
It could
No,
only
I don't know. They were little guys. They were
So at least a little stink.
probably. I don't know. It was in the
lived
corner.
on like your crumbs,
Yeah.
sunflower seed shells, and whatever else is
Poor
down
guy.
there.
Now I feel bad.
Oh.
We had hamsters. We had a season of hamsters and then we were like
Oh, my gosh.
entrepreneurs, so we were breeding them.
Oh,
gosh.
no.
We were.
And then we would
It's
sell
true.
them back to the store, and like you're just trying to cover your costs on that. When you're like 8, this is huge enterprise, okay? So you're just trying to cover like your food costs.
You
and your
bought, wow, you breeded
oh
hamsters.
yeah, and we had the
Guinea pig
cages,
hamsters. Yep.
and we had unfinished basement, half of our basement, and so you had the wire cage. But those guys were climbers. They were Spider-Man. They're just cute and fluffy.
How many do you guys think you birthed?
Oh, dude, and they
Several
would birth
dozen.
like 10.
I was
at a
going to say,
time.
they
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. But it went on for a while.
Long time. Lots of. But they would climb. They would get upside down on the top of the cage and scurry. And then if you didn't put the weight back on the cage, boom, guys out.
Yep.
Unfinished basement, boxes everywhere. So we would do like old school, trap where you'd have like a box on a stick with a, string, like Elmer Fudd. And, you
Yeah.
just would wait until get them. Oh, man. And then you'd have to open the box just enough to like get in there and grab them because you crack it enough. Because they're huge and furry, but I swear they could go through like a 1/4-inch hole and just squeeze through.
Wasn't there one that we never found?
Probably.
Isn't there a story about that? Like he got
Found
lost.
freedom.
We never did. Yeah.
They got out all the time.
Wow.
So it's kind of a fun adventure as boys. Like we were hunting and trapping. In
Now-
our
Did you make
basement.
money?
Enough to cover the cost because there was food and accessories. You'd buy, the cages and the little wheels that they ran
that's
on, and
funny.
the water feeders and
The
all that.
cedar,
so we paid
like,
for all that by just
chips.
Yeah.
having them breed. But long before there were hamsters, there were slugs. At our old house in Bellingham.
I think hamsters and slugs showed up the same day, but that's
Nope.
something different.
on
So
the first day God created
so-
I
slugs.
was going to say dinosaurs?
Yeah.
Long ago, there were.
Long ago.
no, there
You
were
were going
slugs.
sturgeon?
Slugs in our yard in Bellingham. We lived on that side of the state, and there was a lot of rain, and so we had slugs in the yard in the back. And this guy over here at the end of our panel, Scott, he just was infatuated with slugs. So he'd go out and play in the yard, and he'd get them in his hands, and they'd get the slime all over and stuff. He just was infatuated with them. So he'd put them in his coat pocket, and he'd find another. So when he would come in from outside, Cindy would have to clean his hands off and then take his coat and remove all the slugs out of the pockets and throw them back outside.
That's what you do when you're 2 and you're outside roaming by yourself.
You just love slugs.
You go
Wow. I thought you breeded slugs.
I was going to say,
Well, we
is there like a
We
slug
did in our
industry?
yard just
that-
by living there.
Yeah.
And also, when you're out roaming by yourself, when you're 2, apparently you walk onto the freeway.
Yep,
Did
true
that.
story.
I did that apparently.
Let's just talk about Scott's childhood all day.
I don't remember.
Welcome to Theology.
I was out for a walk
Thursday.
by myself when I was 2 and wandered onto the freeway.
Wow.
And the sheriff saw him
It's a
and picked
different
him
time
up and
back
said,
then.
"Where do you live?" And he said, "Oh, I live in that house right there." And so he drove. The sheriff
Smart kid.
drove into our driveway, pulled up in front of our house, and Cindy's just horrified. Like, "What's going on? My son's out playing in the backyard." Well, he wasn't, because our back property line was also the line for the off-ramp for the freeway. We live right next to I-5. And so he just went up the off-ramp and ended up on the freeway, and the sheriff
Were you just
saved
walking?
him.
You were 2?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I was walking, yeah.
He was hanging out
He
with
was
slugs. There was
2?
a slug that was going that
I was
way, so he was
following the
following the
slug.
slug.
Probably. I don't know. I
Okay.
wasn't- I don't remember.
Do you have any fun stories from your
I'm just-
childhood, or do you
I'm
want to
just
talk about
glad I'm
Jesus?
alive.
Let's talk about Jesus.
Let's talk about
Let's
Jesus.
talk about Jesus. We are in John chapter 6. And again,
Talk about Santa's
the numbers are
wife.
kind of all made up by some dudes a long time ago. But it's helpful reference so you can follow along at home in talking about this encounter where Jesus has, the setup. Help me if I'm wrong on this, but I was again looking at this this week, and Jesus crossed over the Sea of Galilee. Many times they were traveling by boat, going from place to place. It was easier travel. You could carry supplies, whatever. And people were always following him. But Jesus was kind of going to get away from others because it's not recorded in John, but in other accounts, it's because John the Baptist had just died. Anybody with me on the timeline here?
I can't help you with that.
Can't help me. Well, I think I'm right, but sometimes you like wonder, because in Matthew 14 is the other place, one of the other places. So Jesus is, because I think it speaks to the character of God, but in Matthew 14, Jesus gets word that John the Baptist was beheaded. And so he's grieving. And so he's going away to be by himself with his closest followers in order to have this grieving moment. And then this crowd of people show up. And in Matthew's account, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, I'm in Matthew 14:14, he had compassion on them and he healed their sick. So just how amazing Jesus is. He's in this grieving moment. His cousin, someone who was making the way for Jesus and a fellow person in ministry, so to speak, he gets word that he was beheaded because of people's evil. And so he grieves because Jesus was fully human. And he shows up, and then there's thousands of people who are like, Jesus, 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 and tugging on him and just wanting something from him. People are always showing up wanting something from Jesus. Everywhere he went, every encounter. It's a good thing he was God, because he was always able to deliver, and he never runs out. But he's having this moment, and he's just trying to get away to grieve, to just have. And then the people show up, and he has compassion on them. He heals all their sick. And then we have this feeding of thousands.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this in weeks before, but verse 2, back to chapter 6 in John, it says this huge crowd is following him. This large, massive amounts of people, and they're following him for this reason, because they saw his miraculous signs and he healed the sick.
Yeah.
Because they knew, they got word had spread that this guy can do things. Like, this guy will heal your sick, this guy will do these miraculous signs. So they're following him for, if no other reason, just to have their needs met or to have somebody else that they know have their needs met. And so this crowd of people are just following him, not because they think that he's God or that he is who he says he is. And last week talked about that in chapter 5, where Jesus is making these claims about being God, being who John says he is all the way through. They're just like, I don't know. He makes sick people not sick. He makes blind people see again. So tons of people are following him.
Yeah. It's like, do you have a bad back and are you hungry?
It's like an
Come follow
infomercial.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll show up. Yeah, what time? Where? Yeah, it happens all the time. And so they're sitting, he sits down with his disciples and this huge crowd of people. And I love this. Verse 5. he goes, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Phil, hey, what do you think we should do about these people? And where should we get some food to help them, eat lunch? And he asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do.
That's so funny.
Right?
Jesus is like,
Jesus,
I just can't imagine that. Like in this situation, your Philip is like in a lose-lose.
Right?
Like, I mean,
he's
just like a pawn in Jesus' scheme here. Like that's really grossly put. But like, that's amazing. To me. Yeah.
And he probably, according to my notes and stuff, he asked Phil because Phil was from around here. So it's like when you go to someone else's town, you're like, hey, where should we go to eat? You live here. Like, what's a good spot?
Yeah, give me the local. I don't want to go to Red Robin.
No. Yeah,
I don't want to go to a chain. I'm not going to Applebee's.
This guy not going to chains.
Give me the local stuff. I can't get anywhere else.
Like Azteca? No, where's a good local Mexican
give me some
spot?
good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going
and
to
so
that chain.
Philip's on the spot going, oh, geez, I'm from around, let's do the math here, Jesus. We don't have enough money. It would take us 8 months, all year, to get enough money to feed all these people. Like, what are you wanting me to do, bro? And then Andrew pipes up with an answer. He goes, hey, there's a kid here with some bread and some fish. What do you think about having a fish fry here on the side of the mountain? Sure, that'll work.
But even Ryan, before that, Philip's response is not just this, ignorance or lack of a response, not knowing what to do. Like you say, man, if Jesus put me on the spot, I'm like, I got to make a recommendation for Jesus. That's a lot of pressure. But his response not only is, oh, this would be good, or I don't know about this. His immediate knee-jerk response is to think of his lack or their lack. Like, oh, Jesus, we don't have enough. Even if we worked for months, verse 7, we wouldn't have enough money to feed all these people. And I think understanding Jesus' question and knowing that he's asking it as a test or asking kind of to see where Philip's faith is at, Philip immediately goes to, Jesus, we don't have enough. I don't have enough. You don't have enough. There's too many people. There's too much need. And he immediately thinks, it's like a really pessimistic view. He immediately thinks of the lack, immediately thinks that we don't have enough. We can't meet this need. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough energy. And so I think he's like, that's a fail.
Well,
you missed the question.
Right, and that's a really good point because we all get there with different things in our life, right? I physically don't have the capability to beat this addiction, or I physically don't have the finances to meet this bill. I physically don't have the know-how to make this happen, this project. We're remodeling our square, and we Scott here bought a table, but built it and basically sanded it and made it look really nice. And if someone said, hey, can you finish this table? I'd be like, I physically don't have the know-how. Scott has the know-how. Scott could be like, yeah, easy. I could set up a table.
Yeah, I Google it and I call friends. That's what I do.
But your first reaction is, I could probably do that. That's more your world. Me, I'm like, I'll buy this one.
And I think it's interesting to note the fact that Philip's not wrong. They don't have enough money. There are too many people. And even the fish and the loaves, the bread and the fish that the guy has, that's clearly not enough for this many people. So it's not that those aren't the facts.
Absolutely.
They are the facts, but it's what they focused on. They focused on the facts, the negative facts, and the lack, rather than on the person who was there, who was the game changer.
And then, because then even Andrew's response is a step up, but he still makes that same statement. He goes, here's what we do have. Right. Here's what we do have, but clearly that would never be enough. I found some fish and I found some bread, but this isn't even enough to fill us, your closest disciples, let alone all these people. And so he's taken, I think, a step further. Like, okay, Jesus, here's what I do have.
Right.
And I think sometimes
that's a good step.
Oh, I'm back.
All right.
I don't know what happened there.
Apparently.
You got censored, bro.
Apparently,
That's
Jesus
right.
did not want that.
Bring what you do have.
He's going to, here's what I do have, but Jesus, that can't be good enough, could it? That can't meet the need that is present. And then Jesus goes from there into this awesome story.
What about the kid? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Then we'll
Back
talk
to
about
what
the
you
boy.
do.
Because I think that's interesting, too, the boy. So I agree, but I read it in this light this time and was looking at it like, okay, because it gets traditionally preached, like, yeah, just bring what you have to Jesus, and then Jesus makes up the rest, right? You've heard that message. I've preached that message.
I'm getting that message out of this text.
Yeah.
That is one of the points.
So, yeah, I think it's a sub-point, though. Because it's helping for me. It's helping to read, and understand what John's trying to highlight. Because I think Philip and Andrew's response are the same response. It starts with me and what I have versus who are you talking to? Like the test, I think, for Jesus was going, Phil, go, what do you want to do? Because you can do everything and anything, like, because you're God. Like, I recognize who I'm talking to. It's the same conversation Jesus had with Nicodemus, the woman at the well, like the Pharisees. Like, wait, who are you talking to? And it's like starts with us all the time. Like, oh, we don't have enough. We're like, well, I got something, and here's my best effort, and Jesus makes up the rest. Like, what if we started with, who am I talking to? Like, Jesus. If you just say something, like, everybody instantly would, like, have a, pot pie right there ready to go, like, hot and ready. Like,
Why you got pot pie for?
I don't know. It's the first thing, a pizza. What do you want, tacos?
Yeah,
pot
pot pie. Who's he?
Man,
Put in the
pizza,
comments
yeah.
if you've ever eaten. Not ever. A lot of you probably have.
Dude,
If
those
you eat
Costco
a
pot pies, you used to do those Costco pot pies
Yeah.
in the microwave?
Back when we had hamsters.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I'm over here on the like when we had.
I don't think I've
I don't
ever
know,
had
I
a
was
pot
just-
pie.
those Costco pot pies, hot and ready.
And
Bread
before
bread and
slugs,
fish.
there
Oh,
were pot
geez.
pies.
But I'm just saying, we start with and preach like, okay, how do we make this about us? What can I bring to Jesus? And we start there. And I think Jesus is always going, why don't you start with me?
Yeah, and very good point. I agree entirely. And not only that, start with asking me what I'm up to, because it says he clearly has in mind what he's intending to do. And that's something about Jesus that we often lose sight of, is he's already got an agenda. He's got an agenda for me and for each of us and for you that are watching. He has a plan, and he has some steps, and he's got something in mind. And we often just don't even ask the question, like, okay, so it's a brand new day. I find myself in a brand new situation. Jesus, what are you intending to do? I'd like to know that before I make any decisions or open my mouth and stick my foot in.
Because Jesus could have done a lot of things. He could have instantly gave everyone a to-go bag and then teleported them instantly back to their home.
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A
Without the
Closed on
pickles.
sandwich in a
Sundays.
bag.
Yes, without the pickle. Pickles are
Because we're not
ridiculous.
there yet, but
Ridiculous.
later when Jesus walks on the water, he gets in the boat. Verse 21, he gets in the boat, and they were willing to take, he gets in the boat, right? And immediately the boat reached the shore. So were they in the middle of the lake, and then immediately they're at the shore?
Probably.
Like, what was that like?
At the end of the book, right, when he does it with Peter, when he after he died and he appears to him and he asks Jesus, is it the end of John where he says, "Hey, how many do you love me?" Says it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's he appears on the shore there too. Same thing.
So it's just like Jesus could have done a lot of things. What is
Yeah,
he up to?
He could
and
have.
I think it's a great. I totally agree, but I think it's also the perspective of which we look at that, because that message, like you're talking about, that's been preached. I think the heart behind that is, again, with Philip's response and Andrew's response, but I think the part where we jump in with our effort is, that question, where do we have enough bread? And if Philip would have just said, we have it in you. We already know you're the bread of life. You're everlasting water.
Well,
you got
He
this.
hasn't said the bread of life part yet.
He might have. It's just not recorded for us yet.
He just said it to the woman at the well, or not the woman at the well.
It was
but
water.
In that when
It's the
his-
water.
Well, yeah. Listen, let me finish. After his disciples came back and said, "We don't have enough bread," he said, "Doing the will of my Father is
Gotcha.
food.
Yeah, it's food."
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm referencing. I apologize.
gotcha.
So
All
bread
right.
of
Not
life-
bread.
All right.
Kyle is wrong.
I'm gonna go back and read it.
This is how most of the meetings go when we're not on camera. On camera, we are a little bit nicer with each other.
So
sometimes.
anyway,
Go
so
ahead, Kyle.
so there that perspective of going, Philip's response going, no, Jesus, we got what we need right here.
Yeah.
But I think that the part where we kind of put ourselves in it and with what we have, the message that has been preached is, I think if Andrew's response was, hey, here's what we have, and we know that with you, this is enough, right? That's the part where I come to God and I go, hey, God, here's what I do have. Here's what giftings I know you've given me. Here's the hardwiring that I have. Here's the things that I have at my disposal. I might know that's not enough in my own capability, but I know with you, it's more than enough.
Yeah.
And I know that when I can partner with you, my small little drop in a bucket becomes more than enough, because in you there is enough. And I don't have to be in lack and in need, because I have you. And so it's partnering with God, understanding who he is and what he's capable of.
Yeah, and Jesus feeds everybody and has leftovers.
That's
Kind
the
of, I
best
think,
part.
More leftovers than he started with.
Yeah, and to that point of like, oh, I didn't actually need to start with your bread. I'm just letting you know I didn't need to start with your bread. I got a bunch left over. You know what I mean? So it's because of that idea, like, okay, Jesus can't really do anything until we bring something to him to offer, and that Jesus is like, I don't need you to bring anything. I don't need you to do any work. I can do it all on my own.
So he does, but I think the coolest part about it is he lets us.
Correct.
Like I was talking about this with my kids the other day. They're like, did God make us? And I'm like, yeah, God made you. But the coolest thing is he let your mom and I have a really big part in it. Like he doesn't need me to do that, but he chose me to do that. And so he doesn't need us to, he proved that by creating us at the beginning in the foundations of the earth, and Jesus knew it, and so Jesus created everything. But the fact of the matter that he does use me is really cool, because I can color a picture for my kids' mom, my wife.
So I have some kids. They have a mom.
I can color a picture for them, or I can help them make a present and really do most of the work.
Yeah.
But the joy in it is for me to help them and let them
To
do
be a
lot of it,
participant
to be a
in it.
participant in it.
Yeah.
So if Jesus just did everything for us, but he lets us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ben.
Yeah.
Just this last week, we were camping with 4 of our grandkids over on the west side, and several times when we have a travel trailer and we were at a campground, and several times when I was doing stuff outside, one of the grandkids would come and say, "Grandpa, is there something I can help with?" And my initial response is, "No, probably not.
You won't do it right.
I'm not going to help.
You won't do it right, and it's not that big a deal, and I can do." And then I would catch myself, and it's like, "Yep, you know what you could do is," and then I would hand them something, and why would I do that? Not because I needed their help, but because I wanted to share the experience with them, and that's how our Father is in heaven. He doesn't need our help with anything, but he chooses to have us be participants in what he's doing because he wants to share the experience with us.
Yeah, that's good.
It's the only way he'll get our hearts.
Yes. Well,
Was that a
I
mic drop
wanted to
moment?
let that settle for that. That was good.
I'm glad you did. That was good.
Because, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, the way that Jesus chooses for us to be on mission with him is, again, he doesn't need us to be, but that's the way he chooses to share the light and love of the world. And John's already talking about that, is that Jesus came and gave this to us so that we could be on mission with him, so that we could, have this relationship with God, and that he could capture our hearts on mission with him. And it's a beautiful invitation to be on mission with Jesus that, we could look at it and pick it apart and be like, why does it work this way? Because that's the way God's doing it through us and with us. And it's awesome and it's amazing to be on mission and on journey with Jesus because that's what he invites us to.
Mm-hmm. And the people are seeing this. I thought this was hilarious because it reminds me of me, and then I think it reminds me of people. Verse 14, the people that saw all these miraculous signs, they saw Jesus heal all these sick people, and that's not even recorded. It's just like this, and he healed their sick. Oh my goodness, like what was that like? People that were paralyzed, people that were demon-possessed, people that were not in the right mind, people that had illnesses, like lifelong things, like healing, like. And then we have this feeding thing, and everybody's had a great show. People that were close to them maybe got healed. They all have their bellies full, so the blood sugar is up. Everybody's feeling good. This is how I see it. In verse 14, right, they say, hey, surely this is the prophet who's come into the world. Like everybody's a believer when there's awesome things happening and you're fed. And we know, like later in the story, it gets really, like the teaching gets hard and stuff, and people are like, we're out.
Yeah.
Like
And
when life's
why
good,
is that? Because
life's good.
Yep.
We're experiencing all these good things, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm totally in with God. And then what happens when it gets tough and rough?
Right.
I'm out.
And you're getting at a very important issue: is our attraction to Jesus because of what he can do for us, or is our attraction to him because of who he is?
Come on.
When
That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, they're looking for the miracle or the miracle worker.
Yeah, that's
and it's
again, that's
human
the
nature.
reason they're there at the
like
beginning.
if you suddenly come into a lot of money, it's amazing how many new friends you'll have, like overnight.
Were you going to give me a lot?
Yeah,
Well,
were you
You got
losing
money?
anything?
We all heard that.
Hey, blood. I'm just saying blood, okay? Get in line.
See what I mean? This is
Get
how it
in
works.
line.
I feel like
You're in the line, but way
Or
back.
I remember the first time that I got a pickup truck. It's like I had a bunch of new friends. Hey,
Oh,
can you
yeah.
help me move? Like I got a thing that can I borrow your truck?
actually speaking of that, I do need.
Yeah,
some.
see what I mean? But that's human nature. We see people.
Kyle has a truck too.
We see people and relationships in the context of what it can do for us.
Yeah.
Like, what's the benefit I can derive from having a relationship with you?
Yeah. And that's where the people are with this.
Yeah, that's exactly where they're
They're
at.
showing up.
And Jesus,
which isn't
Jesus-
horrible
it's not-
as the initial.
No, and
Like
Jesus
when you find
tolerates
out
it.
Jesus can save you, Jesus can restore you, Jesus can help like change your financial situation, like that is a draw, and we should come to Jesus.
Nothing wrong with that.
It draws all of us. When you go, I got a sin problem, and He's the only fix. Man, I'm in. So,
Yeah.
but then it can't just stay there. Like
For
we
sure.
have to mature
Right.
and grow in our faith and have a who He is as a foundation, not just what He does. as
And
a
that's what I
foundation.
love about the way John paints his gospel. And Donnie mentioned it last week in these ideas that we like to pick out these parts of like, oh, well, Jesus didn't say that he was God and that he wants lordship of our life and rule over and have authority to tell us how to live life, to have an abundant life. He just wants to give us the good stuff. Like, no, we can't ignore chapter 5 in the chapter 6s and the chapter 2s of the cool things that God's doing. And John always puts that, right? He goes, woman at the well, and then he lets Jesus talk about what that looks like in her life. He does this water into wine, but then Jesus talks about his authority in our lives. And so, yeah, I think it's really easy for us to get drawn into this miraculous, amazing part of who Jesus is in the miracles and in the giftings and in the stuff that we get, which is completely part of who God is and who God wants to be. But there's also this lordship of our lives that Jesus constantly ties to those things. That I have this for you, but I want better for your life in understanding what it looks like to follow me.
Right.
And as this chapter unfolds here in this story, so after all the feeding, people went on their way. The disciples didn't know, maybe they knew where Jesus was, but Jesus withdrew again. People were trying to make him king. He withdrew. Maybe his disciples knew. But anyways, verse 16, his disciples get in a boat, and they went down the lake. And they set for a different town, and Jesus, had not been with them. And again, I think in timeline, because he needed to withdraw, and he needed to grieve, and needed to heal, and he needed his heavenly Father to minister to his soul and walk through that. And he just had given and healed and fed, and people are always demanding. He's like, a rock star or someone with tons and tons of money. Like, if you have billions of dollars, you probably assume everybody around you wants something from you. Because probably everybody around you wants something from you.
Exactly.
And like who's giving to them. And so then the storm, rages, and they are freaking out like all of us would be if you're in a boat on a storm, like you watch those fishing shows on the on the TV.
Deadliest catch.
I was
Deadliest
just
catch.
going to say it.
Gotcha.
Where you're like, literally people are dying out there.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's seas,
yeah.
30-foot
It's the
seas.
deadliest
It's
catch.
deadliest catch, or yeah,
Hence the title.
right.
Let's
And
see
so
what they did
they're
there.
freaking out like they should be.
It's not the liveliest catch.
And then Jesus walks out on the water because he's God, and he created all the atoms and all the matter, so he can tell the atoms and the
The
matter.
Adams and the Eves.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Oh, you were talking about.
I was
the
talking about
atoms
like
and the-
matter. He created matter, so for him to tell matter what to do is not a problem because he created matter. So he's walking on the water, and then he has this. He says, "I am." I am in this reference to in Don't Be Afraid. He says, "I am" as a reference to like when God spoke to Moses and tell him that I am sent you. He has this "I am God." He quotes God just like in the last chapter we talked about. He claims to be God with this statement, and everybody that's a Jew understood that. Everybody knew that he's making this claim that I'm God and know who I am. And then he gets in the boat and they immediately went to the other shore, which I still don't understand the immediately part. Maybe it's a reference that they just really quickly went there, or did they like teleport?
No, I think there was something miraculous that happened right there. I would be inclined to think otherwise if it was Mark's gospel, because he uses that word immediately regularly.
Uh-huh.
That's part of his literary
Does
style.
he immediately, regularly
He
use
does immediately,
Don't shake
and
your
regularly.
head. That was a good one.
But
It's almost as good as my Adam and Eve one.
yeah,
But anyways,
That's really bad.
this declaration of Jesus going, I'm God. like,
Yes.
to the point you were talking about, Kyle. Like, I'm God. Look at
Yep.
like I am God.
and then he follows it up with "Do not be afraid."
right.
Like something really miraculous is happening, something you don't see every day. There's a man walking on the water. But because of who I am, don't be afraid. And then another miraculous thing happens. To your point, I think they just instantly end up
Well,
at shore.
And that goes with the thought that we've kind of said all along in this book of John, that focusing on the person
Yeah.
of Jesus, not the gifts, not like there's
The
something
s-
greater at work going on when you're with Jesus, right? Just focus on Jesus.
Yeah.
Like heighten your view of Jesus, like with feeding the 5,000, just at the beginning of this, just like there's something bigger going on. That's when he talks to Philip. Was it Philip? And because he's got a plan, and it's greater than just even feeding the 5,000. It's greater than just putting food in their bellies. It's amazing, and it's just that way with our life and how big and amazing that he is. And you said when earlier we were talking about how he's fully God and he's fully man. And to me, that's an amazing point, because I think sometimes I know in my life I will pigeonhole, for lack of a better term, Jesus and put him in my capacity, because my brain only does so much. And so I'm kind of like, well, if I feel this way, then Jesus did this, or I don't understand this part, so it makes this part less important, or whatever. And just settling in my brain that his ways are higher, his ways are non-comprehensible, and I cannot and never will fathom where Jesus is fully God and he's fully man, where he does grieve. Like, if he has to grieve, then he's not really God. No, he's fully God and he's fully man. He's fully grace and he's fully truth. It's not, at times he's partly truth, at times he's partly God. He is fully God and he's fully man all the time, which means you'll never comprehend everything that goes on, so don't try. Just accept the fact that that's beyond me.
And Jesus used those. I love this thought, and I'm just going to jump off of here with that. Is Jesus uses those two titles a lot for himself when he says the Son of Man and the Son of God. And you're like, well, which one is it? Is he Son of Man? Is he Son of God? And it's because he's both. And there's a separation between man and God. There's a brokenness in relationship, and there's division. And so it's like trying to reconcile two countries, and you're a citizen of both countries. And you're like, oh, I know what it's like to be on this side and this side, and I'm the one that can reconcile, because he is the Son of God. He is God, but he's also the Son of Man. He's fully man, and he understands
And his favorite
humanity.
reference to himself is Son of Man. That's the one he uses far more than Son of God.
Yeah, because he's trying to help us relate to a God we haven't seen and can't comprehend.
Yeah.
But he's on both sides of the treaty, and he's the one that is the resolution for the treaty. And so he's on both sides, and he is the solution. That's why it's such a beautiful thing for reconciliation.
It's deep.
And
Well, I had him up until he was both sides, which is phenomenal. I've never actually looked at it like that. I like how you throw that in there, that he is on both sides, like the treaty, and then you throw in the fact that he is actually the solution to the treaty. That it's like,
right?
Okay,
because
there's another layer
there's
there.
Layers on
Not
layers.
only is he representing God,
There once
and
was a man
representing
who lived in a country.
To make it real clear, I think there's an analogy here where life in the dark, when the storms of life are super rough and you feel like there's no hope, Jesus, we've already talked about this, but he is there. He's always with us. But he shows up to the disciples and he goes, I'm God. And then he speaks to their humanity. He says, don't be afraid. Like, there's an analogy for life there. Whatever is happening in life, to go, oh, it's rough when it's dark in life and there's rough storms. But Jesus is God. And he says, don't be afraid. And he makes a way immediately. And so that's maybe a simpler way to what I was trying to say.
And I think there's really a very real relevance of, I mean, it's always a relevant truth, but there's a particular relevance of that in our current circumstances in our country and around the world with the pandemic that's going on, and the circumstances maybe some of you that are watching are experiencing. Know this, that no matter how dark it is and how hopeless it may seem to be, Jesus is there with you in the midst of it, and he wants to reveal himself to you as the God that he is, the I am, and then he also wants to speak to your humanity and say to you, do not be afraid. Because with him in the circumstance, with him in your life and your circumstances, he's the ultimate game changer. He'll make a way.
Well, it's like Kyle preached on a couple weeks ago, just the storm. Like, there's another, I forget where it's at. Where is it? Where he calms the storm and he says peace.
Yeah, this is actually recorded in all of the Gospels, the storm.
So there's multiple storms that he comes in and does.
Yeah, so this one does. We don't. It's like this. The way that John records the walking on water, we don't see the Peter part of it that the other Gospels share. And then there's this multiple storm stories. Matthew, Mark, Luke all share that same. The other one that I referenced was the one where Jesus is sleeping in the boat.
Yep.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke all share that one. John's Gospel, I don't know if they're two separate events, if the walking on the water with Peter, or they're shared events that both happen. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I'm just saying there's always a storm.
Yep.
There's always a situation, and Jesus is bigger than it.
Yep.
And he'll take care of you. So just
and the amount of times in the Gospels, in the accounts of Jesus, and throughout the whole biblical record, that we hear God say, do not be afraid, is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
The amount of times
Over and over again.
angels appearing to people and saying, don't be afraid. Jesus saying, don't be afraid. Peter and Paul writing things with, have not fear, God, that's not from God. It's mind-blowing to me how many times that declaration to us in our humanity is made by God. It says, with me, you do not have to be afraid. And, fear is just a natural part of who we are. You don't have to teach a kid to be afraid. We were just talking about it earlier. How many of us like to be afraid? How many of you like to be scared? Ben loves it. So if you see Ben hanging out.
Nobody likes it.
And you want to.
No.
We don't like that feeling of fear. And you don't have
Hate
to teach a kid to be afraid and to have that fear of falling or hurt. Like, it's natural to who we are. But the amount of times that God tells us, because of me, because of my presence, because of who I am, the declaration that he makes, we don't have to experience fear in our life.
Because to me, it's really easy for us at this moment right now to just say, I'm not afraid. But then when
When
hits
you're in the
fan,
storm.
when you're in the
Yeah.
storm, like Bodie, my youngest, we jumped in the lake the other day, and he is scared to jump in, but he got in. He's got his life jacket on. He jumps in, and he, death grabs me. Death grabs me, and is not letting go. And he's been in before, but whatever. And I can't get my brain around the fact why he just can't let go and just trust his life jacket, because it's never failed him before.
Right.
But for some reason, he's not letting go. And I can look at that both ways. I think Jesus is sometimes like, why are you, and I said it, why are you so freaked out? Why are you so scared right now? And I just picture that as us with Jesus. Jesus is like, look, you don't have to be scared. I'm right here. I'm not letting go. Your life jacket's not letting go. I'm here. I got it. And it's so easy for us on the outside to be able to say that right now even.
Yeah.
But in the middle of it, man, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to not fear.
Yeah. And then when the fear pops up again, or when the food runs out again, we go looking for Jesus, like what the people did there. Hey, we ran out of food, and let's track that guy down again, my back's kind of hurting, and I need lunch again. So they show back up, and Jesus just lays into him again, direct. Verse 26, he goes, I tell you the truth. You are looking for me, not because you saw miraculous signs, but because you ate the loaves and you had your fill. You guys are coming for another free lunch?
Yep. Again,
what's going on here?
Seeing Jesus in the context of what the benefits were to them personally.
Yeah. And he goes, hey, this life's way more than food. Don't just think about food. There's a spiritual aspect to life, and you just think life is about get up, go to work, eat dinner, go to bed, get up, go to work, eat dinner, try to have some fun on a weekend, and then you die, and that's all life is. He's like, you're missing it. You were created for so much more. There's a spiritual aspect, an eternal aspect to each and every person, and we need to be thinking about that stuff.
So then their response is great in 28, right? What do? As he says, don't labor with food that perishes, don't, but for the food that endures, me. Like focus on me. And then they say, well, what do we do? How do we do the work of God? And then he says the work of God is that you believe in him who sent me.
And I love verse 30. Show us another magic trick.
Yeah, exactly.
What else can you do?
Right?
Can you do the disappearing act? Can you saw a lady in half? They're not getting it.
No.
And we're like, no, that's dumb. But we do the same thing.
It's so easy for us to point fingers at these guys right now.
But I love that response. I feel like Jesus has this mic drop moment in verse 26, right? 26 through 27, that he's like, hey, it's not just about what I can do. It's about life with me. I want you to believe in me. I want you to come and follow me. I want to do amazing things with you. Let's do this together. Believe in me. Believe in God. And they're like, okay, yeah, but what about the tricks? What about the smoke show? Can you do that again? And I feel like Jesus has to get a little,
for sure.
frustrated.
No, because he knows the hearts of man. Nobody has to explain guys' hearts or thoughts. And also, they're just like the woman at the well, when Jesus is like, okay, living water. She's like, yeah, give me some of that. They hear, you don't have to go to work to pay your bills and eat. They're like, okay, I'm in. They literally were hearing lottery. They were hearing personal chef comes over, or Jesus is going to deliver one of those fresh boxes to your doorstep every single day with ready-to-eat meals. They're like, great. Forefathers, the Jewish people, they had the manna from heaven, right? Can you do that? Can you send manna and steak and fresh fish every day out of the sky, and it just shows up? We will take that. Free food. I don't have to work.
As long as it's sirloin.
Yeah. Some tenderloin. That's what they were thinking.
Yeah, but again, they're pointing to, and they go to Moses, and again,
Correct.
they go to this thing. Hey, that Moses guy, he did really cool stuff too. Can you do the tricks like he did?
Oh man.
And then Jesus is like, oh,
That's
boy.
Moses.
Oh, that's Moses?
And-
So he did.
And Jesus,
says Moses didn't give you the bread.
right, he says the true bread is not what Moses gave you, but what my Father gives you. He gives the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. And they're like, their response is like the Samaritan woman. Oh, there's water you can drink and never get thirsty again? I'll have some of that. And they're like, oh, okay. You're talking about a kind of bread that is that satisfying, gives life? Give us this bread, Lord. Verse 34.
Yeah. Well, I think they were even trying to give Moses credit for getting the bread. They
For sure.
Oh, for sure they
He
were.
gave them bread from heaven to eat. Like Moses was the source of life and of
Yep.
bread for that time. Jesus is like, oh my goodness.
And
you
that's why
guys are-
Jesus corrects them and goes, you're missing the point. Because,
Yeah.
again, they're continuing to look. They've referenced it and talked about this idea of prophecy and God coming again, but they're looking for a person, a prophet, a king, somebody to come give them what they need. And so they see that in Jesus, and they're looking for this next quick fix. And we do this all the time in our spiritual life and in our physical life. We just need the next quick fix to get through. And if it's Jesus, okay, I'll get what I can get from him.
Yeah.
But Jesus is expanding it so much deeper and going, you don't understand what life with me, how much better life with me is, and how much better I will make your life when we partner together and do this thing on mission together.
And verse 35, I was going to read that.
I was too.
I
So
feel like you were, yeah.
arm wrestle for.
You wanna go
You want to
for it?
read verse
Go
35?
ahead.
And Jesus said to them, go ahead, Scott. You can do the next part.
To Kyle's point, now he has said that phrase, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty. And the people were like, yes, free food for life. This is awesome. And he says, you guys you see me. Like, you literally see me and see what I'm doing, and you still don't get it. You still don't believe who I am and how I've been sent by the Father. And it's just one of those things. It's hard to get out of our own way when we are just seeing things in an earthly, physical world, and yet there's a spiritual dynamic, so that we would pray, God, open my eyes, open my ears, spiritual eyes, spiritual ears, like open my mind. I pray this all the time. God, let me see as you see. Like, I am so limited in my vision. Let me hear as you hear. Like, let me see just a glimpse in my heart of some of the stuff that you're seeing in people's lives, so that I can be a little bit more in tune and jump out of the everyday reality of just, oh, this is life and this is how it works. Like, no, there's always so much more going on spiritually than we're aware of. And that's what Jesus is driving at. And he is the source of life. Like, you don't want to ever be hungry? Follow Jesus.
In this statement in verse 36, I said to you that you have seen me and yet do not believe. And I don't know how many times I've had the thought, especially when I read like the Old Testament accounts of crossing the Red Sea, water flowing out of the rock, the manna from heaven that they're referring to in this passage. It's like, if I'd been there and seen that stuff, I would have totally believed. I can't understand why they just disbelieved and they griped and they complained. It's like, I would never be. No, actually, we would probably be just exactly like that. And here the disciples, they're standing like, I've often thought, how cool would it have been to be one of the disciples and actually walk with Jesus, on this planet and see him with my actual eyes and see him in the flesh. I mean, how many times have you felt that way? It's like, I just wish Jesus would just show up in person. It'd be so much easier. They had Jesus in person. They're looking right at him, and yet the issue wasn't him being there present. It was their heart. I'm right here in front of you. You're looking right at me, and you still don't believe. That's always the issue.
But yet
faith.
hundreds and thousands did believe too. Like, it'd be good for us to talk about that. Like, that's why
Absolutely.
we're here today, is because people did believe, and John did believe, and he did follow. And we, are here because people have followed, given their lives for Christ, and have passed along the good news of who Jesus is. And there have been millions, if not billions, of believers over the years, because where else are we going to go for life? We talked about this last week. Craig, you brought it up, where Jesus gets into cannibalism, right? As they're thinking, because they're still thinking physical. And he goes,
bro.
hey, you're not going to have eternal life. I'm the bread of life, so you have to eat my flesh. I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I'm older. What did he say?
I'm out.
Did he say flesh? No,
Yeah.
not just flesh, but you have to drink with some blood.
Now, just to be clear, it's not actual cannibalism, just so
That's
you know.
how
That's
they're-
why that's how they
that's
heard
how
it,
they're-
But
bro.
it certainly sounded that way to them. Absolutely did.
Do you know why cannibals don't eat clowns? They taste funny.
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
Man, we got to close with
Thank
that.
you. Have a
So
great
good.
week. We'll see you next
That's
time
a
on
good
Theology.
one.
Nicely
Thursday.
done.
Oh, my
That's not
gosh.
in chapter 6. That's not in chapter 6.
I thought we were going to avoid bad dad jokes.
Nope.
No way.
Really?
That's great.
Well, then
I
I want to
don't
go
want
back
any
to
part if
earlier
we're
in the.
avoiding.
I want to go back to earlier in the passage because it said that Jesus had the people sit down, with the guy with the loaves and the fish. Have the people sit down. It says, verse 10, because there's much grass in this place. I just thought maybe cannabis was legal back in that day. I'm not sure.
I was thinking so like, where
Where's
is
he
he
going
going?
with grass?
What
Where's he
terrible
going with
There's
joke!
much grass in
Where's
there.
he
Oh,
going with
man.
grass?
What's
So
the
was
joke?
it legal or illegal?
I'm out.
If you want to get a crowd
See you
of
guys.
people, if you want to.
Wow, we ended
there's
on a low
so,
note.
Yeah, there's
We're
so
not,
much.
we're not
so
done
sorry.
Yet.
There's
No,
so
we're
much
not-
deeper.
We're not done
Look
yet.
at what's
Just
going
a couple
on.
more minutes here where,
All right.
where Jesus is saying, hey, here's how it works. And he's saying, I'm going to die and rise again. I'm going to pay for sin. And there's a death and a burial to conquer sin. But I'm going to rise again in the resurrection power that gives us life. And so that's why communion elements are a symbol of Jesus' body and his blood because of the
Absolutely.
needing to shed blood for the forgiveness of sin. And so, he's saying all this stuff, and the response is it's a hard teaching, the disciples say in verse 60. It's a hard teaching. Like, this is tough to grasp, because if you read all of John's accounts in the Gospels, you go, who is Jesus? Well, you got to wrestle that down and go, well, if he's God, then he died and rose again, and you put your faith in him, you believe, like, his death on the cross is enough, and it's to pay fully for all of my sin, this broken relationship. He is the solution. And to go, this is a hard teaching. It's way beyond, like, a cannibalism thing. And so who can accept it, right? And lots of people just walk away. They're like, oh, I was in on the free food, but once you start talking about eating your leg, that's weird. We're out of here, kids. Let's go. And Craig, you said it last week, right? The disciples' response is like, where else are we going to go?
Yeah, that's Peter's response actually in verse 68.
68.
But I love the way he sets that up, though, because it gets confusing, but he's using context to help them understand, because their question was really back to Moses and the bread that came down that we could eat and we could have sustenance and we could live. Our ancestors could not live without what Moses did,
No,
right?
They
That's their
died, though.
Yeah,
Jesus.
I'm getting there.
Okay, Jesus.
Right? But that's their context. Their context is without that magic bread from the sky that Moses gave us, like, we couldn't live another day. And so they're
Which
going...
was true for that day.
Which
yeah,
was true for that
as they're
day.
going
And then
through.
Jesus blows it up beyond that and helps them understand. So he's using their context to what they're talking about, the conversation they started with this. And in verse 47, he makes it about him and broadens it beyond a day-to-day physical need and a eternal thing. And then he starts explaining this stuff that sounds weird and sounds convoluted. But in light of what he says in verse 47 and beyond, it makes so much sense. I tell you the truth, that anyone who believes has eternal life. Anyone who believes in him. Yes, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate manna that was in the wilderness, but they all died. Anyone who
Right.
eats the bread from heaven, me that I just told you I am, will never die. I am the living bread that came from heaven. And then they're going, they're still trying hard to piece it together, but that's what they're going, oh, okay. That's the bread, receiving you as my Savior. If I believe in you, I get that life, that eternal life, that bread that is sustenance for my soul forever.
See,
Using their context to help them understand
And
that.
it's really good to think with Jesus that everything has a deeper level. It's kind of like when you watch a movie and you get these movie critics and these buffs who like literally dissect movies and like, oh, this meant this. And Star Wars seems to be a big realm for that. It's not my thing. But there's this means this and this means this. And oh my gosh, it was so great because this means this. I'm like,
Right.
I wasn't entertained.
Yeah.
Because you don't know the depth of the stories. And it's so true with Jesus. Like, you're not understand. That's
why you
a
don't
real
get it,
Star
'cause
Wars
you
fan.
don't get
That's-
the depth
That's a
of it.
Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Or
just like that.
a Marvel fan, right?
Oh
They
my gosh.
knows
Right.
all the depths of Thanos and
Yeah, when they do those
Kamos
little
and-
allusions after the credits there, and you're like,
sure.
wait, that's a reference to this and that, and this is going to happen. And you're like, I
yeah,
don't
because they get it. And so he's doing that. He's like inception of all this stuff.
One of my favorite movies.
And Jesus knows that. And in verse 61 and 2, he says about the cannibalism thing and stuff. He goes, does this offend you?
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, you need more. So he says, what if you see the Son of Man ascend to where he was before? Like, what if you just see me go back to heaven, like after I, rise and we hang out and we eat fish on the beach and we talk and I teach and everything. He
Which
says,
they're going to.
Yeah. And he goes, what about that, right? He says, the Spirit gives life, the flesh counts for nothing. The words I have spoken to you are spirit and they are life. So there, we talked about that last week, just where life comes from, and the words of Jesus, the Spirit brings, life through the Word, and the Word in itself isn't life; it's the source of life. And so,
That's a long chapter.
There's a lot going on here, right?
So much.
So much going on. But again, I think that ending note of Simon Peter, when Jesus said, "Hey,
Where else are we going to turn?"
Yeah, this is tough," and he looks at the people that are left. He just sees them walk away. Just abandon Jesus. And maybe some of them came back later. Maybe they saw another miraculous sign. Maybe the Spirit of God working inside of them, they returned at a different point and were believers. Because even John and the other disciples, like, Jesus died. They thought it was over. Like, that was a lot of mourning. And so their faith was growing.
I think we're ending on a really...
Jesus asked that question, where else are we going to go for... Jesus, where are we going to go for life? I don't know.
John actually revisits this in the letter that he writes, 1 John chapter 5. And he puts it this simply. He says, he who has the Son has the life. He who does not have the Son does not have the life. And he says, I'm writing this so that you just get that one basic point. If you have Jesus, you have the eternal life that he gives. If you don't have Jesus, you don't. It's just that simple. The question is, what are you going to do with Jesus? Where are you going to turn? And hopefully you've made the same decision Peter has. And if not, hopefully you will. Prayerfully you will, that you will realize there's nowhere else to turn. Jesus has the words of eternal life.
And we'll end on that note. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, we pre-recorded this just because of everybody's vacation schedules and stuff. But it's still a good quality conversation, regardless of when you're watching it. But thanks for tuning in for this episode of Theology Thursday, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye. Do we have enough room on that card?
Oh, gee.
Oh, no.